Because if we are, certainly we are overwhelmed by the tragedy that's happening in New York. But if we think that is a tragedy, wait till you see what happens in the developing countries, which have absolutely no medical facilities.
So when such countries are coming to a multinational institution like the IMF, I'm saying that strictly because you've obviously worked there before, is that looking strictly like something like loan programs? Is there something else that they're doing to assist, or is that sort of a pure, here's some money that you are asking for?
The IMF is sympathetic to what needs to be done. It has a new managing director who comes from the World Bank and has dealt with a lot of developing countries. And certainly there is a willingness to put money to work. I mean, the caution in the fund is obviously governed by its members. And many of its rich country members have enormous demands on their funds and are worried to some extent about whether these funds will be used well. Now, I would say again, the consensus should be, by and large, governments, when faced with a tragedy, will have to spend properly. And to some extent, one should be a little more open with money at times like this, simply because a few bad apples doesn't deter from the fact that this has huge value for humanity at this point. And there was a letter written by a number of heads of state in the Financial Times a week or so ago. Chancellor Merkel was one of them, basically arguing there's a need to ease the lending from the IMF. The way to do that in the very short run is to increase the allocations of SDRs. This is a technical way of saying the IMF essentially gives every country a line of credit that they can draw on, and that way they don't have to go through a whole program, et cetera, et cetera. They can borrow at relatively cheap rates. This would give a lot of countries easy access to facilities. Of course, it would mean that countries like Venezuela may also get access. Actually, I'm not quite sure about Venezuela. It depends on its standing with the IMF. But not countries that are not in good favor, a few of them may get access, and a few countries that have governments that have looted in the past may get access. But a lot of sensible countries will also. So you have to balance one versus the other.
The informal sector is a key component of many developing economies. So given the lack of government intervention in those markets, how can the countries support people whose livelihoods depend on that work?
Unfortunately, given the limited budgets, I think what governments can do is support people, but can't really support their corporate structures. You know, people stay alive, keep body and soul together during this period. The government, at the very least, provides food and shelter when necessary. And when the pandemic is over, hopefully it can make easy credit available to people so that they can restart some of their activity. But given their budgetary resources, I think it's going to be very hard for them to transfer money to corporations in the way that industrial countries are doing, to pay companies to keep people on their payroll, whose governments simply don't have that kind of budgetary space.
Switching tracks one more time, Dr. Rajan, what are the long-term implications of this crisis on the structure of the U.S. and international economy? Do you see changes to things like supply chains, regulations, or investment in welfare?
What everybody believes is obviously this is a, want of a better term, earth-shattering event. And those tend to jolt our beliefs and change the way we think. You know, the analogy to a war has often been made. It's not quite a war. The loss of life is not as heavy as, for example, during the Second World War, and the duration has not been as long, and hopefully will not be as long. But the sense of demolishing some of our old beliefs, I think, is very much there. You talked about corporations. Well, clearly in corporations, the supply chains will be reconsidered. Right now, the focus has been on efficiency. Can I produce in the cheapest place possible? And I locate my facilities there. Well, now there's a lot more talk about resilience. Can I continue producing under all circumstances? Or am I going to be subject to the weakest link in the chain? So there'll be a lot of effort to see how to rejig supply chains, not just so that they go through relatively safe areas or you diversify supplies of different kinds of products, but also to ensure, and this is a problem for small and medium enterprises, that the entity producing them has sufficient buffers, which typically means bigger and better capitalized. The accent will be on less debt. Also, when you think of employment within firms, it is going to become more attractive to work for employers who have the ability to provide you benefits, etc. The sort of freedom that accompanies the gig economy is going to become less attractive when you know everything can stop. That leads to safety nets, right? There will certainly be more of a focus on safety nets. In the United States, universal healthcare is going to be well and truly on the table for discussion during the presidential election. And my guess is if the Democrats are elected, they will work to try and make some kind of universal healthcare program, put that in place. And universal means universal, everyone included. Simply because this virus tells us the danger of having people excluded when they don't have access, and other calamities like this could happen in the future. So there will be a focus on the safety net. At the same time, when you think about the safety net, you have to think about the other side, which is who's going to pay for it all. Almost surely there will be higher taxes on the rich, regardless of which party comes in, because of the size of the debt. The shape and form it will take is something that I think we have to wait and see. There will be other changes in the international order. We had this really bitter dispute over trade before the virus. Depending on who comes into power by the US presidential election, that dispute could get accentuated as a US-China sort of strategic fight. Or, you may see different tracks being adopted if, for example, the Democratic candidate gets elected. So the US presidential election will be really important this year.
Dr. Rajan, we have just a couple of minutes left, but before we let you go, we wanted to ask you, what do you think is essential for our audience to know regarding either this crisis, the response, or long-term economic outlook?
I am hopeful that when we jolt the system like this, we start looking at fundamentals and see what's going wrong, how do we fix it? My belief is that the global financial crisis was not just a problem with financial markets, that it reflected the deeper fault lines in our society. And I wrote a book on that called Fault Lines, saying that inequality was creating huge problems. And in a sense, the global financial crisis, the buildup of debt in people who could barely afford it, was a symptom of the problem, and that it was important to fix the underlying problem. Well, since then, we've had the Tea Party movement, we've had the election of Donald Trump, we've had Brexit, we've had also, again, signals that all is not well with the system. But we've sort of shied away from root and branch reform. What form that takes needs to be debated, and everybody has their own pet answer as to how to solve the problem. But I hope what this does is wake us up both to the problems, the fault lines that still plague us, but also makes us look into the future. If we see something which seems such low probability, like a pandemic, come and hit us with such force, then what about the problem of climate change that we've sort of put off on the back burner and we see increasingly rising in force? Should we not think that it is quite possible we have a calamity of the kind we've just seen because of something else associated with, say, climate change? Should we not start preparing for those possibilities? So I think broadly, there will be a focus on how do we improve the resilience of our planet. And I hope we do negotiate as countries together a better world order which deals with many of these problems.
Dr. Rajan, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And that's a wrap on another episode of UC3P. Credits go to Sidhant Wadhera for producing, co-interviewing, and editing, and Arjun Motta for co-interviewing. Special thanks to Yash Kirkire for production assistance. Before we get into our usual outro, two things. First, I really want to congratulate Sidhant Wadhera, Caroline Kobzanski, Arjun Motta, Yash Kirkire, and Yaning Wong for putting out these past 5 episodes related to COVID-19. All of you listeners really need to know how hard it was to pull this off. These podcasters care about you, and all of us at UC3P are working as hard as we can to bring you excellent content. Second, from all of us at UC3P, we want to take a moment to thank our doctors, healthcare workers, and all of the other essential workers who are out there saving lives and providing the rest of us with everything that we need. You are all heroes, and no amount of thanks will be able to repay the service you have given to the world in this time of need. Our assistant production managers are Arjun Motta, Olu Ogidan, Saumya Karun, and Sidhant Wadhera. Our finance director is Donovan Harvey. Our publisher is Yaning Wong. Our intro music is Knockout 2 by Datubi, and our outro music is Yes Yes Y'all by Matt Large. Our cover art was designed by Shirin Raban. If you want to hear more podcasts, check out our website, uc3p.org. If you want to contact us, our email is theuc3p@gmail.com. Please remember to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and share the show with a friend. Thank you. My name is David Raban, and stay tuned. We'll be back next week with the start of our brand new miniseries, Gun Violence, the Other Epidemic.
Hi, I'm Matthew Surmont, and you're listening to the UChicago Public Policy Podcast.
No.
What?
No. Go again.
How do you want me to say it?
Don't be so happy. Just be yourself.
Don't you want people to listen to these things?
Go like, hi, I'm Minh Hun Kang, and you're listening to the UChicago Public Policy Podcast.
Yeah.
Do you want me to use like
cash.
an NPR voice?
Be cash. If you have an NPR voice.
This is Matthew Surmont.
Okay, that's probably going to go into the blooper roll.
Is this all being recorded right now?
Yep, it's all being recorded.
Have I signed off on anything allowing my likeness for my voice?
Nope. You have forfeited all rights to your recording, voice recording.
Christ. What am I? Line? What am I saying?
My name is Matthew Surmont, and you're listening to the UChicago Public Policy Podcast.
Hi, I'm Matthew Surmont, and you're listening to the UChicago Public Policy Podcast. Funded by viewers like you.
Thanks for nothing, but I'll cut that out. I'll cut the last part out.